They all already done right.
Well, that's what you think.
That's because I took square roots and just made them 5. So now I'm 25.
Hey, I have your identity sheet out again. All right, any questions here on the homework? I'll take that as a no. All right. Yesterday we did the double angles. We're not going to do the power reducing identities, but we're going to talk about the half angle identities here today. And that first one, this is off of your identity sheet. So on the right hand side, so you got sine of theta over 2, cosine theta over 2, and tangent of theta over 2. Now you also have two others underneath that one. Those do not have the radical, so I think what I'm going to do is use those two just because they're a little bit easier. Now the plus or minus in front, it's not like the quadratic root formula where it means you have two answers. It means it could be a positive answer or a negative answer. It just depends on which quadrant the angle lies in. Okay, so don't think of it as a quadratic root formula where it is two answers. Okay, it is not plus or minus. It will be one or the other. Okay, as we kind of move through that. All right, so for that first one, it says given sine of theta equals negative 5/13 and pi is less than theta is less than 3 pi over 2. So what quadrant is it in? Quadrant 3. Find sine of theta over 2 and then tangent of theta over 2. Well, let's just find sine of theta over 2 first. And the formula is sine of theta over 2 equals plus or minus square root. Oh, this is one I don't usually have memorized. Is it 1 minus cosine or 1 plus?
1 minus.
1 minus cosine of theta. I believe it's over 2. Yes. All right. So we're going to find that now. Is it positive or negative? It's based upon where the angle is, the theta over 2. Well, here's, if you're good with all that and you can figure it out, fine. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a method here. I'm going to change this to degrees. 180 is less than theta is less than 270. Well, if your original angle is 200 degrees, what's half of it going to be? 100. If your original angle is 250 degrees, what's half of it? 125. So basically, I'm going to take each of these and divide them by 2, cut it in half, and that's going to give me the range. Not one, hold on, that's going to be 90. 90 is going to be less than theta over 2 is going to be less than 135. Okay, so our half angle is going to be trapped between 90 and 135, which is in which quadrant? Quadrant 2. So what's sine going to be in quadrant 2? Sine's always going to be positive. So that's kind of how you determine whether it's positive or negative. So that means theta over 2 is in quadrant 2. Okay, quadrant 2. So it doesn't matter where the original angle is, it matters where the half angle is. Okay. So it's going to be a positive answer for sine of theta over 2. And now 1 minus cosine of theta. All right, I got to do a little bit of work because I know the sine is negative 5 over 13. And I know it is in, whoops, it is not there. It is in quadrant 3. Okay. And so it's going to be negative 5, 13. What do we get for the missing side? 12. Okay, so you know the triangle is going to be 5, 12, 13. You put a negative there if you need it, because you're going to have 5 squared plus x squared equals 13 squared. You get x squared equals 144, 12. Now, the big thing here is being able to simplify and just write it in the right form. So now it's going to be a positive answer. 1 minus cosine, which is going to be negative 12 over 13, divided by 2. So it's going to be a little bit of fraction work here. Peyton Burns loves fractions, so let me give her some more help. So she's going to be happy. What is 1 minus negative 12 over 13, which becomes 1 plus 12 over 13? Okay, so I'm just going to do that over here. 1 plus 12 over 13. Well, that's 13 over 13. So it's going to be 25 over 13. So it equals the square root 25 over 13 divided by 2. And what does that simplify to? So 25 over 13 times 1/2. So it's actually going to be 25 over 26. You want to simplify where we can. We know the square root of 25, that's what? That's 5. So this now becomes 5 over radical 26, and I am going to rationalize the denominator. And this is what you should get for that first one. 5 square root of 26 over 26. And for that. All right, before we go to the next part, should tangent of theta over 2 be positive or negative? What do you think? Should tangent of theta over 2 be positive or negative? Okay.
Negative.
It's going to be negative. Why?
Because the cosine's going to be negative.
Cosine is going to be negative, and also what quadrant is it in?
2.
Quadrant 2, and it is going to be negative. Now, this is the same problem. I just need more room. So tangent of theta over 2 should be negative. Now, you got 3 options there. I'm not going to use that first option. It says plus or minus. If you use the other 2 options, it automatically will come out the proper sign, as long as you do your work correctly. So let's just use, I think for me, I'm going to use the last one because it has a single term in the denominator. It does not have a plus or minus. So I'm going to use tangent of theta over 2 equals 1 minus cosine of theta over sine of theta. We've already established that 90 is less than theta over 2 is less than 135. So it is in quadrant 2. And tangent in quadrant 2 is negative. So that means that tangent of theta over 2 will be negative. Well, that's just kind of a double check because, like I said, if we use those last 2, it should work out to the correct sign regardless. All right, what's 1 minus cosine of theta? Cosine of theta, what was that? Negative 12 over 13, correct? And what's sine of theta? That's going to be negative 5 over 13. So now I got 1 minus negative 12 over 13, which is 25 over 13. Positive divided by negative 5 over 13. And I get 25 over 13 times negative 13 over 5. All right, what's that end up equaling in the end? -5. That's all that is. So it ends up being a nice answer. So tangent of theta over 2 equals -5. Okay, equals -5. All right, for that one. All right, now for that next one. All right, cotangent of theta is 3/4. It's in quadrant 3 again. All right, go ahead. I want you to find the sine of theta over 2. And actually, I'm going to give you the answer. I want you to make sure you can get there. Okay, so I'm going to actually let you know what the answer is and see if you can get the same thing. If you don't, you let me know. So make sure you match up. What do you want you to simplify that? All right, so that. All right, I'll go through here a little bit if you're stuck or if you get done good. I just did the same thing to figure out what quadrant it's in. Same condition, so it's going to be in quadrant 2 again. If it's in quadrant 2, that means your sine has to be positive, your cosine is going to be negative, and your tangent is going to be negative when you're done, no matter what method you use. All right, you know the answer is 2 radical 5 over 5, so let's just go through here in case you didn't get that. We are in quadrant 3. So, hold on here. Let me make this a little bit easier. So cotangent is adjacent over opposite. So cotangent is going to be 3, 4, and then 3 squared plus 4 squared. That's got to give us a hypotenuse of 5. Okay, so make sure you got that. Now, obviously, the 3 is negative when we use it. The 4 is negative when we use it within our problem. So cos or sine of theta over 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine theta divided by 2. Well, we just said it's going to be positive. And what is cosine of the angle? Okay, Cooper, what's the cosine going to be?
See, that would be -3/5.
-3/5. Make sure, because if you put positive 3/5, it's going to be wrong from here on out. So you really got to watch your sign. It's going to be 1 minus -3/5 divided by 2. Okay, and I'll give away the next one there. 1 minus -3/5. That's plus 3/5, which is actually going to be 5 over 5 plus 3/5. So you get 8/5 divided by 2 which is a square root of 8/10. I would encourage you to reduce earlier than later. The earlier you reduce kind of makes things easier. So 8/10 reduces to 4/5. And now at this point, you take a look. Do I know the square root of either of those? Yeah, I know the square root of 4. That's 2. I don't know the square root of 5. So this is where I get 2 over radical 5. Rationalize the denominator. And I get 2 square root of 5 over 5. Okay. So that's where the positive 2 radical 5 over 5 comes from. All right, the next one is negative radical 5 over 5. So cosine of theta over 2 equals, all right, since we're in quadrant 2, it's a negative 1 plus cosine of theta over 2. You got to put the negative in there. It won't automatically come out to be a negative for sine and cosine. You got to put it in there based upon the quadrant we talked about. So now this equals negative square root 1 plus negative 3/5 over 2, which is negative square root, what is that, 2/5 divided by 2. Well, 2/5 divided by 2 is 1/5 or 2/10, either way, but it's going to reduce to 1/5. So it's negative square root of 1/5. Square root of 1 is 1. And that's where we end up with negative radical 5 over 5. So that's where we get for the sine or cosine of the half angle. Negative square root of 5 over 5. All right, for that. Now, tangent, you can use one of the formulas, or you can just use the fact that you can divide sine by cosine. I'm going to divide sine by cosine. Okay, since I already have them, might just save me a little bit of work. I'm not going to use either of the formulas. So tangent of theta over 2 is going to be sine of theta over 2 divided by cosine of theta over 2. And so what do we get there? That's 2 square root of 5 over 5 divided by negative square root of 5 over 5. And so that gives me 2 radical 5 over 5 times negative 5 over square root of 5. That negative does not need to travel with that top number moved down below. The whole thing just needs to be negative. Okay, so don't assume that, like, if it's negative radical 5, it needs to travel with there. It can just keep the whole thing negative. Well, everything cancels except 2 and that negative. And so tangent of theta over 2 equals negative 2. All right, so for that case. All right, so that's if you're given a condition. All right, go ahead and flip it over on the back. Okay. Find the exact value of cosine of 157.5 degrees. Okay. Now, what angle divided by 2 equals 157.5 degrees? Or 157.5 times 2 equals what?
315.
315. All right, that's the angle that we're going to use. So if you take a look, so now what I can say is that the cosine of 157.5 degrees is the same as the cosine of 315 divided by 2. That allows me to use that half angle formula. Okay, so I'm going to write it as an angle divided by 2, and 315 is an angle we know the trig functions of. So cosine of an angle divided by 2 is equal to plus or minus 1, I think this one's plus cosine of theta divided by 2. All right, is it going to be positive or negative? Do you know whether it's going to be positive or negative? More information. Aaron?
Negative.
It is going to be negative. Can you explain why?
because when you because the original angle of 315 was between 270 and 360. So when
right?
you divide those by 2, you get that the angle is between 135 and 180, which is in quadrant 2, so cosine is negative.
Yep, you actually did way more than you had to,
Oh.
which is fine. They actually give you the angle. Just make sure you use the 157.5 degrees. Use that angle to take is whether it's positive or negative, not the 315. So whatever we're taking the cosine of, that'll tell you whether it's positive or negative. Okay, not the 315. So in this case here, it's going to be negative, like he said. So it's going to be negative square root of 1 plus cosine of 315 divided by 2. All right, now it just gets a little bit messy. Like, plugging the numbers in isn't bad, but just making sure it comes out correctly, that's where it gets a little messy. No complex fractions, okay? And I do want you to rationalize the denominator unless you're told not to. Every now and then I will tell you not to. All right, so 1 plus, what's cosine of 315? Okay, again, radical 2 over 2, positive. So this is going to be negative square root of 1 plus radical 2 over 2, all divided by 2. So we got to simplify it and put it in its easiest form. Well, now I'm just going to go over here on the side. What's happening here? 1 plus square root of 2 over 2. That would be 2 over 2 plus square root of 2 over 2, which would be 2 plus radical 2 over 2. Well, that whole thing's over what? That whole thing's divided by 2. So it's going to be 2 plus square root of 2 over 2, all divided by 2. What does that look like? Okay. That's the same thing as multiplying by 1/2, which actually is going to give us 2. Let me actually write it out. Times 1/2. So I get 2 plus square root of 2 over 4. All right, so after all that work, this is where we're at. We're at negative square root 2 plus square root of 2 all over 4. So it's not a complex fraction. It does simplify just one additional way. What's the square root of 4? 2. So it's going to equal, so the cosine of 157.5 degrees is equal to negative square root of 2 plus radical 2 all over 2. Now you could use your calculator just to verify that. Okay? So if I take negative, let's see here, square root 2 plus square root of 2 divided by 2, what does that equal? All right, if I've done everything right, that's got to be the cosine of 157.5 degrees, right? And it is. Okay, so make sure it's simplified all the way. All right, Josh, what's your answer to the last one?
I put -4.
-4. All right, we'll see if you're right. Josh, I got a little bet going on. Okay, -4. All right, let's find the exact value of the sine of pi over 12. The sine of pi over 12. Now, in this case here, I'm going to tell you to use a half angle formula because you could use a sum or difference formula for that. But we want to say what divided by 2 equals pi over 12. Okay, what angle divided by 2? So we want to use the angle divided by 2 would be pi over 6. Okay, so here's kind of what we got. We got the sine of pi over 12 is going to be the equivalent to the sine of pi over 6 divided by 2. What quadrant is pi over 12 in? pi over 12 is in quadrant 1, so that means the sign also it has to be what sign in quadrant 1? It has to be positive. So pi over 12 is in quadrant 1. So the sign of pi over 12 is positive. And the sign is going to be 1 minus. So this is going to equal positive square root 1 minus cosine of pi over 6 divided by 2. You got to use the pi over 6 in the equation, in the formula, because we don't know what pi over 12 is. Well, pi over 6 is what, 30 degrees? What's the cosine of 30 degrees? Cosine of 30 degrees is square root of 3 over 2. All right, so we got 1 minus square root of 3 over 2 divided by 2. All right, see what that comes out to. Do a little bit of fraction work. You guys need to practice. And then test it on your calculator. See if you get the same thing. Oh, I mean, Josh already said it's -4, so you can just go right to that.
I'll do that.
Thank you. I was gonna throw you off. Oh, you might have to convert that. What's pi over 12 degrees? Just so you don't have to go to radians.
Oh, that's it.
That's 15?
Yeah.
That's 15. So you might just convert that to degrees.
Somebody up there try to say.
That which was. So looking at this, I get square root of 2 minus square root of 3 over 2, all divided by 2. And so the sine of pi over 12 is going to equal square root of 2 minus the square root of 3, all over 2. Make sure you write it, Lane, so I can understand it clearly where the division bar separates the 2. This 2 is not underneath that radical. And I think that works, right? Okay. All right, page 653. 4 tiny problems.